Welcome to the Law News Network. My name is Stephanie L. Willis, and I will be your host today from 9 to 11 a.m. We are on verdict watch in the Jessica Chambers trial. The jury went into deliberations at around 4 p.m. yesterday and stayed into deliberations until about around 8:30 p.m. when the judge allowed them to go back to their hotel for some rest. And we expect them to be back in the courtroom this morning, and so we'll be bringing you live coverage whenever whenever a verdict is reached. We'll be sure to get you into the courtroom as soon as we get some coverage. What we know from this case is the case went straight through the week. We had coverage on Saturday. There was closing arguments on Sunday. We just did not stop. It continued. And hopefully we'll be able to hear something in regards to the Jessica Chambers verdict pretty soon. What we have today for you, we have a special guest with us today. We have Therese Appel, who's a journalist at the Clarion Ledger. She covers breaking news and crime. Therese, thank you so much for being with us this morning. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
And we know that you've been in the courtroom. You have been our eyes and ears in the courtroom since the beginning. You've actually been covering this case for a while. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I've been on the case pretty much, you could say, since day one. I think we came in, the second day, Sunday after it happened on Saturday. Mm-hmm. And basically have, I feel like I've lived this case for 3 years, just getting to know the people involved and learning more about Jessica, learning about Quentin. It's been something that's been a very large part of my, last 3 years.
Right. And we know that this case has just, we were talking about it before we came on air. A lot of individuals have said that, up until the last day of testimony, they were thinking there may be some reasonable doubt. What are you thinking here?
Well, it's, as I was telling you earlier, it's hard for me to really guess what the jury's thinking, because I have been following the case throughout these years. So I had some knowledge of kind of what the prosecution was going to say. I had a guess of what the defense was going to say. Mm-hmm. I think seeing all those first responders saying that she said Eric, and then hearing testimony that potentially that wasn't, reliable and that kind of thing, it sounded like they were making excuses.
Right.
And so up to that point, yes, there's reasonable doubt. Who is Eric? And then the last two witnesses, Tim Douglas, a detective for the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation, and Paul Rowlett, a federal intelligence analyst, they were the last two witnesses. And what Douglas did was set up these videos of Tellis's interrogations, three different interviews that he had with investigators. And you could see his reactions. You could see him talking to them. In the first one, you're fine with it. Then as they start to confront him with things that they know that he has said that are not true, and you watch him backtrack and you watch him change his story, and you can really see that he's struggling to come up for answers, it starts to make you think, wait, there's something to this guy. And then when the analyst came in and laid out his timeline, and it is a detailed step-by-step timeline based on cell phone data and video surveillance. And when I say cell phone data, there are a couple of different kinds, and he actually explained what the different kinds do in terms that I believe the jury could understand, because it cleared it up for me. It made it very hard to dispute that Tellis was with her and in touch with her off and on throughout the day, and that he was with her up until the end, is what the timeline made it look like.
Right.
The defense went to the timeline by pointing out that Rowlett had said that sometimes cell phone data can be iffy based on what kind of towers you have in the area and that kind of thing, and bringing out that Tellis's phone had one less tower than Jessica's did, that sometimes you can't find somebody if they're not using their phone. But based on between Tellis's things that he admitted to police once they would catch him in what seemed to be a lie, and the video from the store across the street, as well as the store where he bought the green dot card, and the cell phone data, it really does paint a picture of what that day looked like. And I think that is where those last two witnesses are where the tide really turned for the prosecution. Does it eliminate reasonable doubt? It's hard to tell what the jury would think, but I think it's convincing.
And that's what I was going to say. Does it really eliminate reasonable doubt, though, at this point? Because in in covering this trial, we've seen, as you said previously, with her continuously stating Eric, and then we have the individual, the suspect, the black male in the woods that the investigators never followed up with. This is something that I think that to an individual, I guess, just a normal individual, one would wonder, well, why didn't you follow up with that? Why did you automatically just go to Quentin Tellis upon receiving some news, I guess, from the Louisiana authorities that he may have been possibly involved in another murder?
Well, I think that there's some fallacies in what you just laid out there, but they're what the jury believes. The suspicious man on the scene was checked out, but the prosecution neglected to work that into what they presented. So when it came up, it was like, well, we just didn't do anything with that. He was cleared, and his name was not Eric. The other thing was that Tellis did come up early. And then you had all these different Erics and Derricks and, all that kind of stuff. They followed leads into other states. So I think the picture they were trying to paint was that they didn't zero in on Quentin specifically. That was where, and what the analyst was trying to say is, that was where the evidence led us. As we eliminated hundreds of people, this is the one we could not eliminate. And that was the feeling that I got of what they were trying to make the jury understand. But again, you do have the question of Eric. You do have the question of the guy in the woods, because they don't know what I know from having been with this investigation for 3 years.
Right.
The other thing, too, that did, I think, help, but yesterday I was talking to somebody that said it hurt. When he was giving his closing arguments, District Attorney John Champion says, put your tongue on the top of your mouth. Understand how damaged Jessica's tongue and mouth were. You can't use your tongue. She was saying, I'm Hersty, or Hersey. And so she couldn't use her tongue to make a T. So he said, put your tongue on the top of your mouth and say Tellis. And when you do that, it comes out Tellis. And so could she have been saying something that what you hear is the E and the I, and that would be Eric? And so that was one of those things that I thought when he did it, I thought, oh. But I talked to someone else last night who said that it seemed very, desperate to them. So I'm not sure how the jury takes that. That's why I can't call what the jury's going to do, because there are so many good points for both sides.
Right.
Vince did a great job, with their summary yesterday, as did the prosecution.
Well, you brought up both sides did do a great job. However, there was that point, I guess the awkward point, when the defense attorney referred to Jessica as Erica Chambers. What was the atmosphere like in the courtroom when that happened? And then I know that District Attorney Champion later came back and said, well, here's a picture and this is Jessica Chambers. So what was that like in the courtroom?
Well, when you said it and I winced, that's kind of what everybody did.
Right.
Because you know why he did it. It's because everybody's tired, and he's saying Eric, 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 and he had just made the argument, you cannot escape Eric.
Right.
And then he holds up the picture and says, Erica Chambers, blah, blah, blah. And you know that's just because he's got Eric on his mind. But literally everybody in the courtroom went, and then he said it again, and then he said it again. And we were hoping that when he said Eric again, that he would catch himself, but
Right.
he didn't. And in the story that I wrote that's in today's paper, I did say that he was kind of illustrating his own point, that Eric is the elephant in the room. But yeah, that was something that for all of us was just, oh gosh. And even I heard someone on the prosecution side say, I felt really sorry for him.
Wow.
Just because it, one of those really, why he did it, but oh gosh, the wrong time.
Right, exactly. And I read some reports that it's actually, and we know that they've been going balls to the wall like all week, and there have been very long days, and I heard that it's also very hot in the courtroom as well. Do you think that had, I guess maybe the atmosphere in the courtroom, that the fact that, it was hot, that they had very long days, that they continued during the week without any break, do you think that may have come to play a little bit?
Well, yes, and you figure that, and off and on it's been hot. It's like it's been cool in the morning and then it heats up, and then yesterday what was weird was we had this rainstorm come through and it cooled down. But the thing is, everyone's exhausted. Everyone that you talk to, of course, especially you figure the district attorney and the ADA, as well as the defense attorneys are probably up all night, figuring out what they're going to do the next day. And that's kind of something that I think played in for a lot of people, because on the one hand, everybody's going to stay put until this is done. It makes you wonder too how much it's affecting the jury, because on the one hand, these guys have to be able to perform and they have to be able to get it through, but sitting still and absorbing all that information is exhausting in its own way. But I do think that the atmosphere is very much something that's playing in, because the other thing that you have is, you have outside noises. There was a car alarm that kept going off. There was at one point a shooting across town, and you hear every siren probably in the city go in that direction. And it's just a constant moving, situation. And I imagine there's just a lot of distractions for them.
I want to talk a little bit about viewing the interrogation in the courtroom. And we know that Quentin apparently had his girlfriend coming in from Louisiana on that night, allegedly, which is what we know. Do you think that maybe his lies, and they're actually married right now, I believe. Do you think that his lies maybe had anything to do with the fact that he did not want to get caught cheating? Or maybe the fact that he deleted his cell phone because he did not want his girlfriend to possibly go through his phone and see that he had been, conversing with Jessica and texting Jessica?
Well, that would be a good theory, except that they were able to pull data off. They can't pull deleted messages off an AT&T phone. However, the messages between Quentin and Jessica were on Jessica's phone. Now, there were other messages between Quentin and other women that were still on the phone, especially from that hour that they were missing there, where he was silent, but there were calls and texts coming in. One of them from a girlfriend that was here in town that said something to the effect of, "Baby, I was just sitting here thinking how much I love you, and it moved me to tears." So he didn't delete that. He didn't delete the other ones where it was women, obviously talking sweet to him or, trying to reach out to him in that way. The fact that Jessica is the only one that was deleted, to me, was very telling. But that said, he's playing this game where he's got all these different women, back and forth. Was she one that potentially his girlfriend or wife had asked him about? I mean, that could come into play as well. And that's something we don't know. Was Chiquita aware of Jessica and therefore would be looking for her information in his phone? That still doesn't speak to why he would have these texts from other women that are so, not the way you want someone talking to your boyfriend. So it's one of those things that, yes, potentially there could be other reasons that he was, equivocating. But also, when you look at his saying that he's with Big Mike and that Big Mike's in Nashville, and then when they come back to him and say that, he says, "Oh, yeah, he was in Nashville." My thought was, how did he remember the Big Mike was in Nashville that specific weekend? And, of course, there's a lot of reasons for that. Again, it's like you're watching him and you have to kind of draw your own conclusions, because each person is going to take something different from it, which is what is so frustrating for me in a case like this. I look at it and I think, well, I know what I would think, but what do they think? At
the end of the day, that's really all that matters. It's what they think. I want to let our viewers know that you can take a poll on the LawNewz Network to tell us what you think. Do you think the prosecution is going to win this one? If you were on the Jessica Chambers jury, how would you vote? At this point right now, we have 81% that are saying guilty and 19% that are saying not guilty. So I've seen a lot of the times when in talking to our viewers, a lot of the times our viewers are correct. So I don't know. We'll see. But we never know with this jury. So we'll see what happens when we finally get a verdict. A couple more questions before I let you go, because I know that you probably want to get back into the courtroom just to see what's going on. But do you think that the investigators, there was an investigator in particular who decided to throw away some evidence that was found at the scene of the scene of the car, excuse me, and do you think that that may have hurt the prosecution's case at all? I know that during the trial, he testified that he did not think that it was of importance or that they would have been able to obtain any kind of DNA evidence or anything from it due to the fact that it had rusted. So do you think that that may have hurt the prosecution's case at all a little bit?
I think in my eyes it does. Because whatever evidence you gather, you never know until the end of the case what's going to come into play. When you find a certain, suspect, when you can come back and say, wait, we had that piece of evidence that actually fits what we're looking at here. And you never know at the beginning of a case what that's going to be. So the fact that there were pieces that weren't held on to, I do think is very much, or could be very much, a problem for the prosecution. Now, the question is, have they built a strong enough case on these other things? And whether it hurts them or not, stands to be seen. But yes, I think that was a real mistake.
Right. And I know in covering the trial, we know that a lot of the first responders who came to the scene are actually volunteers. So this was probably something that they had never encountered previously. And, seeing an individual with, I believe, up to at least 93% of being burned completely, 93% of her body was being burned. And we saw their emotional testimony on the stand. How was that like in the courtroom?
Well, actually, that day I was not in the courtroom because I had another reporter there. But I can tell you, I am a former volunteer firefighter. I was a volunteer firefighter for 5 years. And what they were saying, I was watching your feed, and what they were saying about the fact when Tim Douglas talked about how they wouldn't have been trained for something like this. I can say from experience, now I've never been on a scene like that, but I know that the first time you encounter something really horrific, it affects you. And it is hard to know what to do with that. And even to the point that, not everybody does have to write a report. But when you do have to sit down with others to write a report, I think we only turned in one most of the time in my department. But when you have to sit down, there is a lot of discussion, like, okay, did you see that? What was that? Or, hey, I was over here and it looked like this. What did you see? So that said, that part was not exactly a grasping stance by the prosecution. On the other hand, seeing these guys and all of them saying, she said Eric.
Right.
I think that to me is one of those things that if this case does not go the prosecution's way, to me, that's the reason. Is that you assume that she knows, or not assume, she knew Quentin. We know she knew him. She knew his name was not Eric. So was she somehow in so much shock? Was she so loopy from the, chemicals of the burning car? Was she so, lost in her mind that all she knew is, I'm dying, help me? Okay, that's all arguable. But still you have that name.
Yeah, that name, I just can't. And the fact that there were, I believe, approximately at least 9 witnesses who said that she stated Eric, that's something that I cannot myself move past. The fact that she continuously said Eric, they were able to understand. I mean, she was able to state her name, even though she may not have been able to pronounce it correctly. Ultimately, they were able to figure out that her name was Jessica Chambers. So that name Eric, it just, I can't seem to move past the fact that she continuously repeatedly stated the name Eric, and we know that that's a dying declaration, but I guess we'll just at a certain point we'll just have to see what the jury comes to. So as of right now, if you're taking our poll, what are you saying, guilty or not guilty?
I probably shouldn't answer that in order to remain
neutral.
Objective.
Okay, I gotcha.
But I feel like there is a reason that you could pick either side and not be, unreasonable. Okay. I mean, like both sides have presented something that if you were to say, I don't know, I can't say that he did it, or if you were to say, yes, he absolutely did it, I think there has been evidence and, reasonable doubt and on both sides to say, okay, either way you pick, you're not I mean, somebody's wrong, obviously, but you could go either way, and that's part of the reason I can't take a stand, because it's at this point it's anybody's game.
Have you, throughout your investigation and throughout covering the case, because I know you haven't only been covering the trial, you've been covering the case in its entirety, had you ever had the opportunity to speak to Jessica's mother?
Yes, I actually sat down with her a year and a half ago, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
and we had a discussion. And she and I we remain connected on Facebook and that kind of thing too.
Okay. And I know that she was one of the individuals who actually was looking on Facebook and noticed that upon one of the jurors being dismissed, was she the individual who actually informed the DA's office about the juror, I guess, placing notifications on Facebook that he or she was a member of the jury?
I know that Lisa knew about it, but
Mm-hmm.
I also know that I got that screenshot of that post from about 6 people. Now, that said, I came to the Clarion Ledger from a newspaper in Lincoln County, which is right north of Pike County.
Okay.
So I have a going in Pike County. So I know a lot of people from down there were aware of it and were trying to get it to somewhere that it needed to go, so that they could see that he had been posting about it.
Okay. And have you seen her in the courtroom? How has she been, throughout the trial?
It's been hard to watch all of Jessica's family and Quentin's family as well, to be honest, because you see them, as the prosecutors are presenting these tough facts, and when they're talking about these different things that have allegedly gone on between Jessica and Quentin, I'm sure during the photos and that kind of thing, you could look over there and you could see, at one point I noticed both Ben and Lisa had their heads down and were, just, I guess, absorbing it and trying not to get too emotional. The rest of her family is very much the same way, and you can see them comforting each other throughout. Everyone so far has held it together, but it is very much a case of taking these families through probably, well, the worst day of their life was probably that day. But then, this is just a rehashing of the whole thing. I know they'll be glad when it's over, but I think for them it's never over.
Yeah, for you're correct. I mean, for any family, it's never over, and we're only sorry that the family had to actually view a lot of the images that that the prosecution displayed in the courtroom, because it was hard to watch. It was even hard to cover. Seeing the photographic evidence, the pictures at the crime scene, that was a bit difficult. And so having the family there, I can surmise that it was even harder for them. We're going to let you go, because we know that we thank you so much for being with us today, but we know that you have to do some coverage on your own. So we thank you so much for being with us today, and we'd love to have you back once we hear about this verdict. So thank you so much for being with us today, Therese.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, have a great day.
You too.